Do you all remember when this room was an instant death trap when the Light Blade released in Witch Queen? Now, we've become the death trap. Take a look at what I mean. Grandmaster Nightfall, by the way. For today's build, I'd like to go over my updated Prismatic Titan build that is still comically dominating PvE endgame content to a borderline game-breaking degree. Now, just to be upfront and crystal clear, yes, this is in fact another Consecration Titan build. So why am I talking about it now? Well, while Consecration Titans have been a thing since Final Shape launched, there have been some changes to the game since then, namely things like sandbox updates, an entirely different artifact to work with, and possibly more importantly, right now there's significantly more easy access to exotic class items, which for a lot of cases is like the lifeblood of crazy prismatic builds. And right now you can get exotic class items via Ava through the Festival of Lost event pretty easily. So if you didn't know already, here's how you can optimize getting those. But let's talk about the build now. To start off, let's just talk about the obvious. What combo do you want on your exotic class item? The short answer here is literally anything with Syntheseps. If you get that, you're golden. Now, if you're trying to min-max for an ideal role, best case scenario, etc., you can pair Synthos with either Heart of Immortal Light, which is probably the best choice, but it's not mandatory. You don't have to have this on. And other picks, you can also go for things like Spirit of Assassin for going invis, Severance for an explosion, or Eternal Warrior to pump out some extra damage for your super as well. For the build itself, with Episode 2 launching, we've got some new things to play around with and some choices to tweak. The two main things that are different now is that Episode 2 has a completely different artifact than Episode 1, along with a new tonic system, and there have been some sandbox changes to abilities as well. For example, in Episode 1, the by far and away best choice for the super was Twilight Arsenal. It was so good that Bungie decided to nerf its damage when paired with Spirit of Star Eaters. Plus, we also had Weakening Void on top to boot. For this current build, we're going to be using Thunder Crash as our super for a few reasons. First, Thunder Crash damage was adjusted this episode and is currently doing silly damage. Second, it's a light ability that instantly fills your light meter with ease. And lastly, we can utilize the artifact and tonic system to give it even more damage output via the Conductive Cosmic Crystal artifact, which gives our arc abilities bonus damage, and if the target is affected by a stasis debuff, you get even more damage. Moving to the rest of our abilities, the aspects here are still a no-brainer. It's Consecration and Knockout. These are your two best choices by a mile. Consecration is going to be single-handedly destroying everything in sight that you'll be seeing in the footage. As for the melee and grenade, we have Frenzied Blade selected as our melee. This could be used as some free dark energy by using your regular melee on an enemy if you happen to need it, but otherwise you're going to be using Consecration most of the time. As for our grenade, this is up for debate and player preference, but I actually like the idea of using thermite grenades in endgame PvE content, specifically because it does decent damage, but also helps fill your prismatic light meter quickly, as it's the harder one of the two to fill up initially before you get your engine going. Moving on, before I get to aspects, let me just quickly talk about the weapons I'm using and why I'm using them, and then we'll get back to aspects. For our kinetic slot, we have Lost Signal, the grenade launcher from Episode 1. This baby essentially is an instant prismatic dark meter factory, and it makes it so you never have to worry about building dark energy. It's just incredible at doing its job in that regard. It's also extra juiced up this episode because the artifact mod called Concussive Reload allows you to weaken any enemy that we happen to hit with our grenade launcher. So not only are you using it to feed you tons of dark energy, but you will also weaken any enemy that it hits in the process. If you haven't already crafted this weapon, I highly suggest you do so. And as far as what role I use, currently I have auto-loading with Vorpal on, but depending on what activities you're doing, One for All is also a solid choice to put on this as well. In my energy slot, I have Ariana's Vow. Now this choice is specifically favored to wave-based content that has champions in the game, things like Grandmaster Nightfalls, Expert Onslaught, Master Dungeons and Raids, and so on. Not only has Ariana become a solid weapon after Bungie finally fixed it after a whopping 5 years, but it's also, in my opinion, the only decent barrier stunning champion weapon in the game for the energy slot right now, because, truth be told, I tried shotguns, they're eh. I tried scouts, they're terrible. Ariana's Vow just one-shots every single barrier champion and gives you an addition on top, so I find that to be the best possible option. And yeah, I know Wishender and Arbalist exist in the game, but Lost Signal is just too good to take off right now, in my opinion, so Ariana's is the next best choice. But hey, if you like scouts, or you like using the new shotgun with the glitch trench barrel perk, by all means, be my guest. Maybe you got the new Dungeon GL, the void one that you can put in the energy slot, and then you can rock Wishender if you like. That's also an option, but I just went with the Ariana's personally. Lastly, we have the heavy weapon. This one is the most interchangeable of the three. I currently have a sword slotted with Eager Edge for a very specific reason. The first is closing in on far spaces between enemies as fast as possible, so I can pop off with my Consecration Slams, especially if I'm in Prismatic and I have unlimited slams. I want to, utilize and abuse that as much as possible. And the other reason is, well, I'm an impatient asshat, and I like to zoom past incredibly annoying things, such as moths, fake C4 ammo bricks on the ground, or the light blade trying its hardest to shove that giant axe where the sun doesn't shine. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you don't have to run an Eager Edge sword in the slot if you don't want to. If you're more comfortable with a traditional heavy, then you just go with that. Utilizing all of this, your goal is to essentially get to your first prismatic meter as fast as possible, because once you're there, you're basically going to be unstoppable in any content in the game. As far as gameplay looping goes, you want to have two things happen. The first is you want to fire Lost Signal at waves of enemies as fast as possible to build that dark energy. And number two is you want to activate Synthos as fast as possible. Once you have Synthos active and the enemies are weakened, you just immediately start Consecration Slamming and throwing your Thermite Grenade or whatever grenade you're using, and start building to your first prismatic meter as fast as you can. Once your first meter is there, you're good to go, and at this point, you're basically unstoppable unless something one-shots you, which is very rare with this build. As soon as you pop Prismatic, you're going to start feeling like Mario when he eats too many shrooms, and at this point, everything's just going to die in front of you. You want to go ahead and start spamming your grenade, which is both a jolt and also a suspend for barrier champions, or unstoppable champions too, I suppose. And you're also going to be building a ton of super energy while you're doing this because of our mods, which I'll get to in a second. When you get your T-Crash, you either use it immediately on a yellow bar enemy that needs to die, something like a light bearer in GMs that can't be suspended, or you just wait until your prismatic runs out, and then once it's gone, you use a T-Crash on any enemies around you, and if it happens to be a yellow bar enemy, the T-Crash will kill it and also give you a ton of light energy, which means you're going to be very close to getting back to your next prismatic already. Then again, you repeat the loop of spamming Lost Signal, get your dark energy, and then bam, you go back into prismatic and go into Hulk mode again. Okay, I think now it's a good time to talk about your armor mods. By the way, this build will be in the description below in case you want to try it out for yourself, but I'm just going to mention the mods on screen for people that don't use them for whatever reason. So, starting top to bottom, we're going to go with Helmet first. In here, we have one mod and 3 copies of it, which is going to be hands-on. This mod lets you get bonus super energy on melee kills. This is what I was talking about when I said you're going to get your T-Crash very fast. So with having 3 of these, you're going to pump out a lot of super energy every time that you do Consecration Slams. In your gloves, we have the same thing. We have 1 mod and 3 copies of it. In this case, it's heavy-handed. Each time that your powered melee attack kills someone, you will create an Orb of Power, another way to get to your super faster. Your chest piece is up to preference. You could either put 3 resist mods for whatever activity you're doing, or you can put reserve mods for your weapons if you're running double energy like myself. For your boots, we actually have 3 mods here. The first one is going to be Recuperation, which replenishes your health each time you pick up an Orb of Power, which will be constant. The second mod is going to be Invigoration, which reduces your melee cooldown each time that you pick up an orb. That's fantastic as well. And lastly, we have Absolution, which reduces all ability cooldowns each time that you pick up an orb. Lastly, the class item, and these mods actually play a key part in the build, at least when you're doing high-end content or you're playing maybe solo with blueberries. So the first mod is going to be Special Finisher. The reason this is here is because me personally, and maybe you, are going to be running double energy, right? And sometimes your ammo is just going to be low, or you're in an activity with famine and there's just no drops. And Special Finisher fixes that problem because you're going to be killing like 95% of your enemies with your abilities, which will make an orb, which will make you easily get to 3 stacks of armor charge. Then, when you see an enemy that's finishable, like a champion, for example, you can finish that champion, kill it, and then it'll drop a green brick, replenishing your ammo, so it's perfect. Now, the second mod here also goes with that, and that is Proximity Ward, which gives you an overshield when you're performing a finisher. This technically isn't mandatory, but I was doing GM Lightblade this week with the new, what do you even call it? The new Death Trap from Bungie, where you will get a present that drops, which you think is an ammo brick or an exotic, and then it just explodes and kills you sometimes. So Proximity Ward gives me an overshield when I go close to an enemy and finish it, and helps me stay alive in case that stupid mechanic happens. And then lastly, we have Powerful Attraction. This is really good for when you're just slamming a billion enemies, but you don't want to run like everywhere to pick up each orb individually. And when you activate your class ability to gain some energy back, Powerful Attraction will also suck up all the orbs around you and give you your super that much faster instead of wasting time running around like an idiot. But yeah, that's it. That is my updated build for Consecration Titan. That's just mocking the entirety of the endgame. One question for you guys. Do you think that this will be getting nerfed in the future? I'm not saying it should be nerfed, but do you think Bungie thinks that it should be nerfed? Anyway, if you did enjoy the build or the video, please consider subscribing today. It does help the channel grow and is much appreciated on the way to 50k. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can leave a like and or comment below as well. If you don't know what to comment, you can leave Titan as the comment. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.